I often say this because it's true, that I need the lesson that God gives me to teach more than anybody here. So if you get something good out of it, then that's a blessing for you too. As you know, I've often taught that you will not receive anything unless you use your faith. God has given me teaching faith. He's given you receiving faith. If you're not active in faith, you'll sit there and find yourself somnambulent, and that's not what we want. While it's restarting, how many remember the story of Korah?
Yep.
Talk about someone who would have benefited from Solomon's commandment in Proverbs chapter 9. The fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom. It's not the end, just the beginning. Let's see if we can get this thing going again. It'll be much more interesting if we can. I am intermittently fearful of the Lord. While this thing's starting, I'm just going to go ahead and work off my memory. Yeah, let's go to the next slide. We might as well do that. Korah and 250 men decided Moses was a bad leader. And he said, Moses, you've been leading us in the wrong direction for a long time. We want to go back to Egypt. And Moses said, I can get you to the promised land just as assuredly as the sun rises north. That's a joke I picked up off somebody. Apparently not a very good one either. Okay, it looks like it's going to work.
Thank you, Lord.
Don't know what it was fussy for, but it was. And this is a layout. No, let's go back to that if we can, Daniel.
I'm going to your original slide.
This is a layout of how everyone was situated around the tabernacle. Kohath and his group were on the left side, and so was Reuben. So the princes of Reuben and the princes that God needed them. And that wasn't such a good idea. Does everyone know the story of Korah?
Yep.
If you don't, you should. It's one of the most interesting stories in the Bible. Korah and his group thought that they would just go ahead and take over. Korah, Dathan, Abiram, and On were elect men, men of renown, princes of Reuben, and they were in league with the leader of Kohath. You can see they were on the same side of the camp. They rebelled against God and Moses. You know what? I think they missed the memo. That God was in charge, not them. Moses was in charge because he had the fear of the Lord. And they certainly didn't. Are we like Korah? We don't even know what the fear of the Lord is. And I'm going to give you a little analogy, a little simile, a little metaphor, whichever one of those works for you, about what the fear of the Lord is. I grew up in the 50s. Some of you also did, some of you didn't. It was different then. We had, and you can go ahead and advance, Daniel. Here's Korah. He should have been paying attention. And let's go to the next one. He went down to the ground. You guys know this story. Do I have to tell you the story again? Okay. He went into the ground. It wasn't more than a couple of days later when the people were back in Moses' face and saying, why did you kill Korah? As though Moses could make the ground open up. They probably thought his wampum stick was responsible because he had done this to the Red Sea and it did that, so they thought Moses probably went, oh, there you guys go. But that's not what happened. God did this sovereignly. Daniel, we can go to the next slide. Hitler remade the Roman Empire in Europe, conquering all of Europe and most of northern Africa. Let's go to the next slide. Japan reclaimed the Mongolian Empire, renaming it the Co-Prosperity Sphere. These were the two most powerful empires, each of them ever. Each one of them separately was more powerful than Rome, than Greece, than the Mongol Empire. And the two of them, America in the 40s, stomped them both into the ground. How did we do that? We were, if anything, a sleeping giant. Admiral Yamamoto voted against attacking at Pearl Harbor. He said, "I fear we will awaken a sleeping giant." And that's exactly what happened. We were sleeping at the switch. We were just fat, dumb, and happy. And all of a sudden, we did not know. I remember this. My parents and friends of theirs talked about this. We didn't know if we were all going to end up speaking German. And all coincidentally, not living anymore. Because Hitler was working on an atomic bomb. Oh. He also had, they were designing what they called the New York bomber. It was a huge plane. It's larger than any plane except the Spruce Goose that Howard Hughes made. It was capable of, without refueling, flying that bomb over to New York City, turning around and making it back to Germany on its own. We were desperate. So what do you do when you're desperate? Run around screaming like Chicken Little. Oh, we're all going to die. We're all going to die.
The sky's falling.
We prayed. And we meant it. And just like during the American Revolution, when God did sovereign miracles to help 13 little weak colonies beat the strongest nation on earth, Great Britain, we prayed and God moved. Now, Martha and I have an advantage over most of you. We chose to be Americans. I was born in Germany. We can go to the next slide. Martha was born in Guatemala. And once the world feared America, they were in awe of us. Let's go to the next slide. The beginning of wisdom. The awe of the Lord. Martha and I were born in different countries. We can go to the next slide. But we chose to be Americans. If you choose to be an American, you have to find out what America is or was. And it fit our values. We believed that America reflected our values. We don't understand what America is today. There are only two nations that were ever founded to the glory of God. One was Israel, was founded to the glory of God, and God gave it to Abraham and his descendants. The other was America. No other nations have this honor. Let's go to the next slide. And to the next slide. God blessed and chose this land to spread the gospel. Next slide. Who was Robert Hunt? The second was founded with Reverend Robert Hunt. On December 20th, 1605, Reverend Robert Hunt, 105 settlers, and 40 seamen sailed from London, England, with a charter from King James. Yes, that King James. And he carried a declaration that was handed to him by King James. King James was a believer. He wasn't perfect, but he was a believer. The Declaration Charter said a true declaration of the state of Virginia. First, to preach and baptize into Christian religion, and by the propagation of the gospel, to recover out of the arms of the devil, wow, a number of poor and miserable souls wrapped up into death in almost invincible ignorance. Who's he talking about? Who are these people? To endeavor the fulfilling increase of the number of believers who shall be gathered together out of all corners of the earth, and to add to our might the treasury of heaven. This charter declared that the gospel would go to all lands, and it would go from America. America has been the nation that has sent out more missionaries and more Bibles than any other people ever. So who was this guy? He was a successful Anglican priest who had a successful mission at home in England. He was beloved by his church and by the archbishop, who was in control of the Anglican church. And the bishop kept moving him up to bigger and bigger churches. But then there was news that came from across the sea. Something had been discovered. And among the discovery, they found that there were people who had no idea of God. And Robert Hunt said, I have to go to these people. That was no easy task. They left right around 1607, and it took 139 days, I think that's on the next slide, to get there. No, pardon me, 145 days. 145 days to go there over North Atlantic seas. The roughest Atlantic seas are in the wintertime. When I came from Germany to America, we were in the North Atlantic during the winter storms. And the ship, my dad made videos, 8mm, videos of the ship as it was enduring this storm. The winds were so fierce that even though they were making maximum revolutions on the prop, we were being pushed back toward Germany the whole time the storm was going on. And the video, you can see the ship with a wave coming. If you're on a ship, head the bow into the wave. If you're sideways to the wave, you're going over. But as the ship would see a big wave coming, the waves were as tall as the forecastle of this ship. And the ship would be at the top of the wave and then would start down like a roller coaster. And would get down to the bottom, and the bow and the first about quarter of the ship would plunge underwater. And then you could see the ship struggling like an animal to resurface with buoyancy. And then you were riding up another way. And then it was again. I almost died on that voyage because I was so sick that, I almost croaked. When they got to New York, they rushed me to the hospital. That was the first time that I know of that the devil tried to kill me. Not the last time. But who was this guy? He went across the North Atlantic in that kind of sea. You see, there was a talk of a new land with new people, and he felt a responsibility for these people. He left his comfortable life. He left his family. It was too dangerous to take them. And he sailed in small wooden boats to get to America. They carried a rough-hewn 7-foot wooden cross, and we can go to that picture, all the way across the Atlantic. There was not a lot of space on those little ships. Things had to be moved aside so that this cross could be taken onto the land. By the way, this happened at what is now Fort Henry, Virginia. The wooden cross is gone, long gone, but they've replaced it with a stone cross. It is a fort. It's Fort Henry. If you want to see this place, where the first real landing was. This is before Plymouth. This is before the Pilgrims. You have to apply permission from the military, from the army. It takes about 2 days to get permission to go see this stone cross, which is where this prayer. They gathered around this cross, and Hunt prayed, and I'm going to read you his prayer. As they knelt in the sand, he first reminded them of what Yeshua said in Matthew 15:13. Every plant which my heavenly Father has not planted shall be rooted. Those are sobering words for us today. The interesting question is, will we be rooted up? Raising his hands to heaven, Robert Hunt claimed this land for God, for England, and for the King. He consecrated the continent to the glory of God. He declared, from these very shores, I'm reading the prayer that he prayed standing there, the gospel shall go forth to not only this new world, but to the entire world. This man had vision. We do hereby dedicate this land and ourselves to reach the people within these shores with the gospel of Jesus Christ, and to raise up godly generations after us, and with these generations take the kingdom of God to all the earth. Now, obviously, he did not know that Yeshua's name was actually Yeshua. For him, it was Jesus, so I have to read it as he prayed it. Continuing the prayer, may this covenant of dedication remain to all generations. This man had vision. As long as this earth remains, and may this land, along with England, be evangelists to the world. The second nation that sent out the most evangelists and Bibles was England. So he was praying a prayer for them too. May all who see this cross remember what we have done here, and may those who come here to inhabit, that's me, it's Martha, that's a lot of you, join us in this covenant. You're being invited to join in to these covenantal words. And in this most noble work that the Holy Scriptures may be fulfilled. If you remember, Yeshua was asked, when are you coming back? He said, when you have spread this gospel to the whole world. Apparently, we haven't finished yet. We got more to do. After the prayer, they read this Bible passage. This wasn't a 5-minute prayer meeting. All the ends of the earth shall remember and turn to the Lord, and all the kindreds and nations shall worship before you. For the kingdom is the Lord's, and he rules over nations. Psalm 22. Let's go to the next slide. 169 years later in Congress, July 4th, 1776. This was 160 years later. There was what I think might better be called a Declaration of Dependence on God. It was signed. By the way, show of hands, how many people have read the whole Declaration of Independence?
Maybe one. In school, Bobby.
Okay.
In school.
It's interesting. Not only does it have important principles that they believed in, but about the last 2/3 of it is a list of all the reasons why they were rebelling against England. And most of those ended up in what are nowadays called the Bill of Rights. The colonists signed the Declaration. I'm going to read the opening. When in the course of human events it becomes necessary for one people to dissolve the political bands which have connected them with another, and to assume among the powers of the earth, the other nations, the separate and equal station to which the laws of nature and nature's God entitle them, a decent respect for the opinion of mankind requires that they should declare the causes which impel them to separate. We hold these truths to be self-evident. You know that one, don't you? That all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain inalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, that to secure these rights governments are instituted among men, deriving their just powers from the consent of the governed. And whenever any form of government becomes destructive to these ends, it's the right of the people to alter or abolish it and institute a new government. And that's what they were doing. They believed that they had no other choice because things had gotten very desperate. King George was a despot. If you want to read the things he did, go to Google and open up the Declaration of Independence and read the last 2/3 of it. You'll find out. Let's go to the next slide. Then, 11 years later, they wrote the Constitution. Now, Benjamin Franklin said they examined all other constitutions that they were aware of. The government of Rome, the government of Greece, and the governments of Europe. And they said, this won't do. We need something brand new. These three words existed nowhere else before. We, the people. Before that, it was me, the king. And you get on the wrong side of me, and I'll mow you down. The king owned everything. He was a dictator. This is the first time that a government was formed on the basis of we, the people. It was to be our government, and it was to serve us. I don't know if you know this, but the Constitution was not designed to tell you what you can do and can't do. It was designed to tell the government what they can't do to us.
Right.
It was a document of freedom. Be the king. What is our Constitution? It's not a democracy. The Democrats like to say democracy, democracy, democracy. It's not a democracy. You know what a democracy is? The Greeks invented democracy. It's basically a high-class form of mob rule. In a democracy, if 51% of the people vote for something, that's it. No checks and balances, just whatever. If you remember Socrates was trying to educate the people, the children, the young people of Athens. And the leaders of Athens did not want him educating people because educated people are harder to control. So they told Socrates, stop it, or we're going to kill you. And he didn't stop. So they voted. Over 51% said, yeah, let's kill Socrates. They expected that he would take the next boat to Corinth or Istanbul or somewhere. Instead, he said, no, you people are not going to get away with this. I'm staying. So they poisoned him to death. That's democracy. Socrates and Hemlock. A constitutional republic is a republic where you send people to the government to explain your ideas and what you think should be done. And constitutional means that there are rules that they have to abide by.
Right.
We'll see how they're doing. The founders firmly believed in the Bible. They knew that the sinful nature of man, left to itself, always leads to disaster. And so they believed that the best thing to do was to split up powers. So they took their model from the Torah. In the Torah, God split up the powers of Israel among three: the king, the prophet, the priest. And those three work together or apart, but they tend to check each other when one of them got out of line. You remember Elisha and Elijah were always checking King Ahab. He didn't like it much. But But the idea was that there would be checks and balances. We took this and turned it into the executive, the judicial, and the legislative. And those three are jealously trying to protect their power. So they're trying to keep the others from having too much power. It was a pretty smart idea. There were other things that they cribbed out of the Bible. For instance, all over the place, you find it everywhere. It's throughout the Torah. It says that everyone is equal and everyone must be judged equally under the law. That's from the Bible. They found over 3,000 words, phrases, ideas that were cribbed from the Bible and put into the Constitution. How do we know that? They wrote a series of papers, a series of books called the Federalist Papers, explaining where they got their ideas from and why it's in the Constitution. And these things, these ideas were incorporated in the Constitution because they feared another dictatorship. As I said, the 10 Bill of Rights, the 10 Amendments, first one is, oh, by the way, you should read that too. Freedom of religion. There are people who have taken that away and people who are trying to take that away. Freedom of speech. That has pretty much been taken away to a large measure. Freedom of the press. Well, the press currently is free to spout nonsense. The right to bear arms. You have a right to own a gun if you want one. Well, why would I need a gun? Well, a gun is sometimes a little quicker getting to your house than 911. Martha and I don't own a gun. I've asked God many times if I could buy one. He's always told me no. But that's me, it's not you. Every one of you are different. God's making me just depend on Him. But if God has told you to buy a gun, buy it. Protect yourself and get a course on how to be wise with firearms. I came from a military family. I know how to handle rifles, guns, shotguns. I can do all of it. God just has chosen that I'm not to do that. But He might choose that you do. And what if you want one and the government says you can't have one? The amendment says they cannot infringe on your right to bear arms. They're trying to. They're trying to take our guns away. Every government that has ever subjugated its people into a dictatorship has first taken the guns away. The guns were taken away from Germany in the 1930s, from the people. Stalin took guns away from his people. Pol Pot in Cambodia took things away from his people. As soon as the guns were gone, all hell broke loose. The reason they don't want us to have guns is because they want to have the freedom to do whatever they want. It's as simple as that. They are sinners in control. We need to be praying for these people because most of them are dirty, rotten rascals. President Harry Truman said that if a man gets wealthy in office, he is a crook. You take a look at these people. Obama, when he came to office from Chicago, he had about $450,000, most of which he got, but we won't go into that. He now has 4 houses, each of them over $7 million. And other stuff. Where'd that money come from? Oh, I know, he was being paid $165,000 a year. He must have been a great saver. Yes, I'm sure that's it. These people are thieves, and we let them do it. Those who do not vote are voting for criminals. Well, John, the last time our votes were stolen. If you doubt that, you haven't been paying attention. we have hard evidence that the last election was stolen. If Trump is elected this time, he'll be the only person since FDR who's been elected president 3 times, but he didn't get to serve the middle one. We need to vote. It's a responsibility before God. Freedom isn't free. It's work. How about Amendment 3, the housing of soldiers? They could, in revolutionary times, they could just take your house and make any use of it they wanted. Amendment 4, protection from unreasonable searches and seizures. We actually have a law now which allows them to do unreasonable searches and seizures without warrants. The FBI can come to your house anytime they want. Just bust in. If they really don't like you, they'll show up at 4 o'clock in the morning with machine guns and a SWAT team. They've done that to a lot of people that have offended them. My uncle was the Southeast Regional Director of the FBI in the 60s. I know they can be good. I know they're no longer good. These are dirty, rotten rascals, and we have let it happen. I know God wants to help us out of this fix, but we're going to have to participate. Amendment 5, protection of the rights to life, liberty, and property. Private property was established by the Constitution. Other governments didn't have that. Other governments insisted, you can use this as long as we say so. Not good. Amendment 6, the right to a speedy and public trial by an impartial jury. January 6th, we all know that those silly people who went into the court, into the Congress, and just toured around. They didn't touch anything. They didn't break anything. They didn't assault anybody. They didn't do anything but go in. And they've been sitting in jail since then. None of them have been charged with a crime. None of them have been taken before a jury. But they've been sitting there in Washington jail since January 6th. This is very meaningful to me because I wanted to go. Because I knew that the election was stolen and I wanted to voice my opinion. And Martha said, "You're not going." And I prayed and she was right, wasn't she? I would still be in jail. The right to a speedy and public trial by an impartial jury. How do you think impartial jury is going for Trump in New York? Interesting question. By the way, I'm not supposed to be political, but I'm supposed to report the news. The right of a trial by a jury shall be preserved. Nowadays, they can try you without a jury if they want to. Are you getting the picture? All these amendments have been cut. Amendment 8. Excessive bail shall not be required, nor excessive fines. You remember that strange-looking judge who wanted to fine President Trump, what was it, $320 million? Excessive bail or excessive fines. I think that judge is unconstitutional. How are we doing with amendment number 9? The enumeration in the Constitution of certain rights shall not be construed to deny or disparage other rights retained by the people. In other words, anything not given to the federal government belongs to us. If it doesn't say they can do it, that power belongs to us. How do you think that's working out for us? Not really that well. It's there in the Constitution, though. How about the last amendment, amendment number 10? There have been 11 more since then, or no. What is it? 17 more? Whatever. Amendment 10. The powers not delegated to the United States by the Constitution, nor prohibited by to the states are reserved to the states respectively and to the people. This is kind of a repeat of that last one. It means if the Constitution doesn't say that the government can do this, then those powers belong to the states. How's that working out? Texas decided, you know what, we're going to close the border. And the federal government came roaring down and said, you can't close your border. And Greg Abbott said, okay, we'll do it anyway. And there's a big fight going on. The roots of the Constitution are all in the Torah. This year we can vote for renewal of the Constitution or more of the same. At 1:30 p.m. on September the 4th, the first day of the Democratic National Convention, the Democrats removed from their platform a plank calling for the isolation of Hamas. Now we're giving money, humanitarian aid to Hamas. Have you read what Hamas has been doing with that money that was sent to them? All the bombs and missiles they're finding? But back then, they had a platform that said isolation of Hamas, the permanent settlement of Palestinian refugees into Arab countries where they can fuss with each other, and the recognition of Jerusalem as the capital of Israel. That was in the Democratic National Convention platform. That was good. Then the Democratic platform did away with God. When the planks support abortion rights and gay marriage, then it's no wonder that God's name might be dropped as well. In 2008, the Democratic platform declared that we need a government that stands up for the hopes, values, and interests of working people and gives everyone willing to work hard the chance to make the most of their God-given potential. You see, the Democrats were not, in the past, were not like the ones we see today. My grandparents were yellow dog Democrats. And that's an old Southern expression. It means I'd rather vote for a yellow dog than a Republican. Yellow dog Democrats, but that's who we're voting for. The Democratic Party is different. Harry Truman is one of my favorite presidents. He's not respected because he was a humble man, but he was a great man. If you've never read a biography of Harry Truman, you should. It's very encouraging. So that was in 2008. That's pretty good. In 2012, when a certain person was nominated for president, God-given was taken out. And in the arguing that went over about this, they said, we don't want God at the Democratic Convention in 2012. Do you remember who was nominated at that convention? The Republicans actually increased in their platform references to God from 2 to 12. We need to remember who we are. If we don't, we can lose this country. And this country is only the second country ever dedicated to God and blessed by God as an eternal country. Father, we thank you for this beautiful day today. I pray that we would see what we need to see. And I pray, Father, that we take seriously the words that Solomon gave us. The fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom. Thank you so much.